Words presented by your local Rotary Club. Today's book is The Great Challenge, written and illustrated by Katherine Garcia. I think you'll find this book quite interesting because Katherine, when she wrote it, was an Auburn grammar school student just like you. The Great Challenge by Katherine Garcia.
Hi, I'm Katherine, and I'll be reading The Great Challenge today. It was a cold night, and Oregon was running through the vacant streets. As he was late, and it was quite dark outside, getting to the town square had been a bit of a struggle. The King of Japan had died, and the country needed a new leader. Every man who was older than 14 was going to the town square where one of the past king's servants would announce the Great Challenge. The winner of the challenge would be crowned king. The challenge was never easy. You had to be simply brilliant to win it. It was the only way to be sure Japan had the best leader. Oregon raced into the town square just before the gates closed. He wiggled his small body through the crowd till he could see the announcer clearly. "Hello," the announcer's voice boomed through the square. "As you all know, our beloved king passed yesterday. And, as you all know, that means it's time for a new king." A small cheer rippled through the crowd. Oregon looked behind him at the magnificent castle that towered above. He could just imagine how much his little sister would love to live there. If he could win the contest, maybe then his family would realize that he was more than just an extra mouth to feed. And maybe then his father would come home. "Attention, please," the announcer said. Moving on. "The challenge that will decide who the king is," he opened an envelope. "Whoever can make a piece of paper stand on its own in the most creative way." The announcer looked out to the crowd. "You have 14 days to turn in your entry." Everyone stayed quiet. Oregon looked around at all the people standing around him. So many people, he thought. So many smart people that could beat him. He dropped his head and looked down at his feet hopelessly. He turned to leave, feeling defeated. Then a thought occurred to him. He could make a piece of paper into a cube. He sprinted through the streets in his bare feet, slapping the cold cobblestone. He splashed through puddles, not slowing down one bit until he got to his small house. His heart raced. Could he actually do it? Could he really win? "Mother, Marie, Nadim," he called as he burst through the door. "I can do it. I can do the challenge." "Oregon," his mother said in a stern tone, "your grandmother is asleep. How dare you yell? You could have woken her." She slapped him on the side of the face. "Now go wash up. You're late for dinner." Oregon went to the sink. His face stung like pins and needles. His eyes stung with tears. Why was he such a disappointment? He turned on the water, letting it run over his hands. It reminded him of his father. His father had always loved water. Every summer they would swim in the river together. His father was the only person who had ever loved him, and he was the only one who could keep his mother calm. No one knew why he had left or where he had gone, but the whole town felt the absence of the cheery man. And they all longed for him to return. Oregon dried the tears from his face and took a deep breath. If Nadim saw the tears, he would laugh and tease him. His brother was his mother's pride and joy. Oregon didn't understand why. Nadim was lazy and never tried anything new. For example, Nadim hadn't gone to the announcement of the Great Challenge, and he was 17. It didn't matter, though. Nadim was his mother's favorite. Marie bounced in, and Oregon scooped her up, tickling her all over. The poor girl had no one to love her either, and she didn't remember father. He left when she was but a year old, and she would have loved him if only she had known him. Stop it, Marie giggled. Oregon let her down and helped her reach the sink. She hummed and bobbed her head as she washed up. She dried her hands and slid them into one of Oregon's. Nadim was just getting in, and Mother kissed his forehead. He wasn't in trouble for being late. Oregon and Marie set the table, then they took their seats. Grandmother was already at the table, sitting quietly. She never spoke. She had been full of sadness ever since grandfather had passed. Oregon worried that if his father didn't return soon, Mother would become trapped inside herself as well. Unlike most families, dinner was a silent meal. Oregon ate quickly. He was tired from his long day and wished to sleep. Once he was finished, he cleared his place and went upstairs to his bed. He climbed into his bed and laid down. His eyes swelled with tears. He missed his father so very much. When would he come home? Closing his eyes, he drifted off to sleep and started to dream. He was standing by a river, his father beside him. The water twinkled from the sun's light. It was beautiful. The trees were swaying in the breeze, the birds were singing, the water flowed smoothly. The sun's light and warmth spread through the earth, and he was with his father. A large crane flew over the river. A single feather fell to the ground. Father picked it up and handed it to Orgon. "Keep this feather safe and with you for all of time," he said. "It will help you through the hard times and give you hope and strength, for it comes from a creature of hope and strength." Orgon nodded and tucked the feather away as his dream faded and he woke. He sat up. The idea that the town square wasn't what he wanted to do anymore. Now he wanted to make a crane out of paper. A crane was a symbol of hope and strength, and Japan's leader had just passed. Hope and strength was what the people needed to have right now. Orgon lit the lantern by his bed and looked around. Where could he find a piece of paper? His eyes landed on a small book, and he opened it and took out a page. The flat object looked in no way like it could become a bird. He had to start somewhere, though. He turned the rectangle into a square. Then he folded it in half twice, then diagonally twice. It was still flat, but now he could push two sides in and make it a diamond. He was stumped after that, though. How was he going to make this work? He set aside a piece of paper and decided to continue in the morning and get some sleep now. The sun shone through Orgon's window. He sat up and rubbed the sleepiness from his eyes and remembered his dream. He turned to the bedside table and picked up a page from his book. He turned it over and over, trying to figure out how to turn it into a crane. He folded it in half to make a triangle, then the fragile paper ripped. He got a new piece out of the book and started over. He tried folding it a different way, but that didn't work either. The paper ripped and refused to fold the right way. It seemed impossible. How was this going to work? Orgon was determined to make it work, and he spent the whole day trying new things, but nothing came of it. With overwhelming tiredness and darkness creeping up, Orgon blew out the lantern's wick and closed his eyes to sleep. As the days passed, Orgon started to worry that he would not be able to make the crane. He hadn't left his house for 8 days. He had stayed up late every night and woke early every morning. He had hardly seen his family. In fact, he hadn't seen them at all. He stayed up late every night and woke early every morning, other than when he would leave to his room to get some food. He had gone through one entire book that was 500 pages, and he was almost halfway through the second 500-page book. Through his many failures and mistakes, he also found success. For every time he made a mistake, he would never make the same mistake again. Nonetheless, he was starting to fear that this was impossible. But his determination was fierce, and he believed with all his heart that he could do it. He had to do it. He had shown his family that he had to show his family that he was worth more than they thought. Marie ran into Orgon's room and hopped up onto his bed. His past attempts crinkled and slid off the bed like water from a waterfall. "Hey kid, what's up?" he said. "I missed you, so I thought I'd come up and see what you were doing," she said. "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to make a crane out of paper. I'm having some trouble, though. Any ideas?" "You might want to find a crane egg if you want a tiny crane," Marie responded. "That would help, wouldn't it?" Orgon laughed. Marie nodded and gave him a hug and bounced out of the room. He was lucky to have her. She was always there when he needed a laugh. 2 more days passed, and Orgon was on attempt 887 when he had a breakthrough. He figured out how to make the crane's wings, and now he just needed to figure out the body. He only had 4 days left to complete the crane, and he believed strongly he could do it. His crane got closer to what he wanted every time. He wanted the final one to be perfect. On crane number 987, everything was perfect other than the tail. He couldn't figure out how to make it. He adjusted and folded and creased until he had 1 page left in the book, the 1000th page. This was it, his last chance to perfect the paper crane and achieve his goal. Orgon carefully ripped it out. He folded it in half and then folded it in half again. He adjusted and folded and creased until he had the perfect paper crane. Orgom jumped out of bed and ran downstairs. I did it, Orgom exclaimed. He ran through the kitchen and presented the crane to Marie. Look, he said, I made a tiny crane without an egg. It's beautiful, she responded. Is it for the contest? Are you going to win the contest? Yes, the crane is for the contest. I don't know if I will win, but I have to try. Orgom took a small box from the shelf and set the delicate crane inside. Then he put the box into his pocket. The judging was tomorrow, and he wanted to keep it safe until then. He hustled through the day, paranoid that something would happen to the delicate crane. What if he lost? What if it got ruined? That night, Orgom could hardly sleep. He tossed and turned for hours with nervousness and excitement. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of the day to come. Some dreams were good, others were bad. In some dreams he would lose, but in others he would win. The dreams left him puzzled. Were these signs that he would win or lose? He couldn't tell. When he woke up the next morning, he was more nervous than he had ever been. He ate a quick breakfast, then headed out the door. As he ran to the town square, he heard a buzz of excitement all around him. Everyone seemed to be excited about the new king. When he arrived at the town square, there were only 27 people standing there. He thought back to the day of the announcement. The square had been full of people. Were these the only people who had been able to do the challenge? When he arrived, the announcer walked out and said, "Hello. If each of you could all stand in a line for the judges, that would be greatly appreciated." They all hustled into a line and stood silently. "Thank you," the announcer said. "Now every one of you will be judged, but only one of you will win. So I wish you all luck, and may the best man win." Orgom shook with excitement. As the judges walked out, he opened the small box and took the crane out. He put his palm flat and set the crane on it. It balanced until it stood. The judges sent some people away and told others to stay. One judge approached Orgom, inspected the crane, and nodded. Relief flooded through Orgom's body like a wave. When everyone's paper had been inspected, only 6 men remained. The judges made a circle and discussed the remaining creations. Then they turned to the contestants and set 4 of them away. One had a paper that looked like a cube, and one other had a triangular prism. Orgom didn't catch sight of the other 2, but he could tell by the looks on the men's faces that they had worked very hard. Orgom looked at the boy standing next to him. He must have been the same age as Orgom. Then Orgom's eyes drifted to the small object the boy held in his hand. It was a dragon made of paper. Orgom started to panic. The dragon was so intricate and amazing. How could the judges pass on that? Once again, the judges made a circle and started talking. Orgom's heart sank and his mind filled with doubt. There was no possible way he could win now. The judges turned towards the 2 boys. "We've made a final decision," they said. The winner and Japan's new leader is Akinari. Akinari jumped in the air and shouted out, "Yeah!" As he was jumping up and down, the dragon fell from his hand and landed with a clang. The judges looked at him in shock. As they approached Akinari, fear came over his face. One judge lifted the dragon from the ground and stripped a strip of paper peeled away, revealing a metal statue of a dragon. A tear ran down Akinari's face. A judge handed him the metal dragon and sent him away. Then he turned to Orgom. "You, young sir, are now the new king of Japan." Joy flooded through Orgom's body. He looked at the judges in disbelief. They all smiled and nodded at him. Orgom felt a tear of happiness roll down his cheek. He smiled and started to laugh. He had done it. He had won. His sister would get to live in a castle like the princess she was. His brother and mother would be proud of him, and he could give his grandmother something to be happy about. Most of all, his father wouldn't be able to resist coming home after he heard the news. Orgom looked at the judges and nodded, thanking them. Then he ran from the town square. He had to get to the house as soon as possible. He raced down the streets. He ran faster than he had ever run before. Then an appalling thought burst into his brain. What if his mother had the same reaction she had on the day of the announcement? He shook the thought from his mind and raced down the street to his house. How could his mother be upset about her own son becoming king? He slowed down when he got to the house, carefully opened the door, and walked in calmly. His mother was in the kitchen. Orgom slowly approached her. "Mother, I won. I am the king of Japan." She set down her knife and looked at him in disbelief. "Are you pulling my leg?" she asked. "No, I won." A smile came across her face, and she started to laugh. This was the way Mother had been before Father had left. She ran to the stairs and called for Nadim and Marie. They came down the stairs. Marie jumped into his arms and hugged him. Does this mean I'm a princess?" "Yeah, you're a princess, Marie." "Way to go, little guy," Nadim said. It felt good that his brother was proud of him for something. Grandmother came through the door and smiled at him and gave him a hug. "Come on, let's go to the castle," Orgom said. They all walked out the door and hurried to the castle, and there was the person Orgom had been waiting to see for years, his father. "Orgom," he said. "Father," Orgom explained, "how did you get here so fast? Where have you been? Why did you leave?" Father enclosed him in his arms and responded, "I was only one town over, and I heard right away that you were king. I couldn't wait to see you." "Why did you leave?" Orgom asked again. The whole family looked at Father in wonder. "My father got very sick suddenly, and I wanted to be near him for his last years. When your grandmother already living with us, I knew another person would never fit in our small house, so I moved to him." Orgom nodded and buried his face in his father's arm. The whole family moved around him, and suddenly the family was whole again. A few days later, Orgom was crowned king, and his new creation of paper folding was named origami after him. For many more years, he expanded on the crane and made many more creations. He was a great leader as well, and helped his people through hard times, and helped them learn from their mistakes, as he had when he created the paper crane.